Okay, my friends, here it is. The Saturday morning live stream at the Garden Like a Viking headquarters, Zone 5/6, Northern Indiana. We got a real special one for you today. We got our first ever live interview. We got Tony from Simplified Gardening. He's going to be on the channel here shortly. He's backstage right now. And so I just want to touch base with everyone and make sure that everything is working. I see here that the Gardener Scott is in the chat as well. What's up, fellow YouTube gardener? If you guys haven't checked out Gardener Scott's channel, make sure you check that out as well. He's another one. Maybe we'll get him on the channel sometime. We'll do a live stream. What do you think? Because it's all about building community. So, guys, let us know where you're at and how things are growing right now, how the weather is. For us, it is quite cold, 16 degrees, but it felt like 2 degrees. That's Fahrenheit. So it's pretty chilly. We're going to set up the sauna today here in a little bit. In a few hours, we're going to set up the wood-fired sauna. Guys, the garden project is completely, it's amazing. I mean, it was awesome. Camille and Viking Uncle came over and we knocked this thing out in like 2 days, 2 solid days of work. And the whole thing is radically transformed. You won't even be able to recognize it. I would like to show you real quick. Well, I can't lift it up and show you, but there will be plenty of videos coming in the springtime about the garden, the design, the thought process behind the whole thing, the drip lines. Make sure you let me know if there's other aspects that you want to see. But really what happened is that when we put these beds in, now all of a sudden it's like it feels like there's double the amount of real estate than when I had everything in the ground and hodgepodge kind of all over the place with logs separating things. And that was also great, but this is a whole different level. I mean, I literally feel like there's at least 50% more real estate, and it's just awesome. So, and we didn't have to get any soil or nothing. This soil was beautiful. 5 years of no-till in this area, and then we tilled it all up, and you literally could not ask for better soil. The whole thing is just thick and rich and black and full of aggregates, nice and crumbly, everything that you want. So yeah, guys, we will, if you follow my Instagram account, then you've already been seeing some of this. So yeah, that's what we're doing. So I'm just waiting for everybody to get here, make sure everyone's here. And then we're going to bring on Tony. So, AK Froggy says, greetings from zone 2B, currently negative 14 degrees Fahrenheit. But I got a great indoor celery crop. Nice. That's pretty cold. That's pretty cold. Okay, guys. So 34 degrees. Yeah, 16 degrees here. Definitely, Pop Herm. Very cold, yeah. So, guys, make sure that you show Tony a warm welcome. We're just going to bring him on, and we're going to see where the conversation goes. And let me get I had a few questions prepared, but we will go and do, we'll go with the flow, because this is my first live stream, so we will see how things go. So give me just a moment to pull this up, and then we will get on with it. So guys, have you seen Tony's channel? For sure you have. If you haven't, then check it out. Also Gardener Scott. Also remember our friend Big Will Dog in the Garden. He's got a channel now. Also Shooting the Soil. He's part of the tribe. Also Enoch's channel, the Urban Gardener. All these are part of the community. So we want to support, okay? All right, guys. Well, we'll bring on Tony, and we'll see what's going on. Yeah. So let me see how I can do this. Let me see exactly how I will do this. Tony, add to stage. All right. What's up, my friend? Can you hear me? Okay, hold on now. Can you guys hear him? Remember, this is our first time, okay? So can you guys hear him? Because, this tech. Okay. Can you hear me, Tony?
I can hear you fine, yes.
Ooh, okay. Real quiet. Your sound is real quiet. Let's see here. Can you? Okay, Donald Hughes says he can't hear you. Let's see here. Audio. Okay.
Audio.
I can hear you, but it's super quiet for some reason. Can you turn up your gain? You got to get real close to the mic and turn up your gain.
How's that?
Yes, better. Can you turn it up any more?
How's that now? Can everybody hear me now?
Can everyone hear you now? Kim Williams says can't hear Tony. Okay, Look to Nature says faintly. Ooh, Pam says can't hear Tony. Okay, we'll get it.
Okay. All right, let me...
No problem. I mean, I can hear you. It's faint though. So no, I don't hear it at all now. I don't know if there's anything I need to do.
How
Okay.
was that? No?
It was better
Must be
in the
your
beginning.
end.
It was better in the beginning.
Okay.
Let's see here. Okay, so a lot of people saying they got good sound.
How is that?
Okay. Whatever you were doing, as soon as you turned up the gain, that was the best.
Is that better?
Okay, can you guys hear him?
How is that, guys?
Okay, I think it's pretty good.
Okay.
I think it's pretty good. Everyone's saying that they're able to hear it. Queen RB says faint. Can you get close to the mic?
How is that now?
I feel like it's not
why
loud
that
and
is.
cool. Now I'm not.
Let me leave, and I'll come back in and see if that makes a difference.
Okay.
All right?
Yep. Let's see. Okay, he's gonna come back in. Okay. Thank you guys for hanging out, for bearing with us. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Still a bit low. Kim Williams says still faint. Says that's fine. Yeah, I know. Good enough. I know. But we don't like to do good enough, do we? So let's see here. Hopefully he can come back into the chat. We don't know, do we? So, okay, guys, I know it's real. See, the first thing happened, or that happened to me the first time that I was on the channel, that I was on Enox with this software, okay? So we will have to see what's up. But while we wait for him, okay, here's Tony. He's back in. We're going to say, ooh, I'm going to edit his mic settings. Mic volume. Should I? Okay, I turn the mic volume all the way up. Should it say automatically adjust mic volume? This is useful. Okay, let's try that. Okay, how about now, Tony?
Now, guys.
We can hear you. Let's see here. Okay, stick with us. Just almost there. Almost there. How about now? Try it, Tony.
How is that now?
It's gonna have to be good enough. I think it's pretty good. It just, for some reason, you're real quiet.
I don't know why. I got full volume, full gain on the Vocaster, so it's not normally like that.
Yeah,
if
when
it's
I
an
did
issue, what I'll do, I'll restart my system and I'll come back in. Oh, people saying it's okay. All right, so cool.
Okay.
As long as people can hear me, that's the main thing.
Right, as long as we can hear. Okay, sounds good enough. Okay, so here we go. What's up, Tony?
Try again.
Yeah. Hey, thanks a lot for agreeing to do it.
No problem.
Okay. Yes. VA Green says that's good. On with the show. That's right. Okay. So, Tony, for the guys that don't know you, just give yourself an introduction. You know, what sparked your passion for gardening? Did you have any early mentors along the way? Where are you at? You know, where are you located? Just tell us about yourself a little bit.
Okay, so my name's Tony O'Neill, and I live in South Wales in the UK, which is it's a small village or a cluster of villages near Cardiff. Been gardening since I was 7, so 42 years, and my grandfather got me into gardening, and of course, over 42 years, you pick up a lot along the way. I then went to college, horticultural college, and I trained there and had the YouTube channel since 2007. So I'm an OG YouTuber.
2007. Wow.
Yeah.
That's what first getting started.
Probably one of the first gardening channels on YouTube.
Oh, very nice. And since that time, how has the gardening landscape on YouTube changed? How could you say?
It's changed so much. There is like when I first started, obviously there was only a handful of channels and people were doing a lot of vlogging and things, but now it's a case of everybody's doing information based and what have you. And but it's like the amount of channels now, which is great because that information is out there. But when I started YouTube, there was no algorithm. Google had only just bought YouTube because it used to be a dating website before that. And so the discovery wasn't there and people didn't even know what YouTube was. So to grow was much slower. And it's quite funny actually, because I'll hear people who have started a channel and they're like maybe 5 months in and they're going, well, you know, I'm not growing. I haven't hit 1,000 subscribers yet, you know, within 5 months. And it took me nearly 5 years to get my first 1,000 subscribers because no one knew what YouTube was back then. They weren't searching for gardening content and things. So it was amazing, like to see the transformation in YouTube over the years and where people what people expect from it now. You know, they want a yesterday and they don't want to have to put that little bit of work in, you know.
Yes, that's a really good point because I see that all the time with people, and they're like, "Man, I've been doing it for 6 months already, and I don't even have not even monetized."
Not even half a season, is it?
Right. I've made like 20 videos. Come on. Yeah. Nice. Okay, so you're not actually in Ireland. Is that what I heard you say?
No, I'm in South Wales.
Okay. And so, what nationality are you then?
I'm Welsh.
Welsh. Okay. I
Yeah.
see this whole
So,
time.
In the UK, we have 4 nationalities. Obviously, you've got English, Scottish, Welsh, and Irish. So that forms the UK.
Very nice.
It's probably Wales is probably, or Welsh is probably one of the oldest of the nationalities in the UK, because it was a lot of England was part of the Wales sort of boundaries, if you like, before all of this kicked off and before they all combined and everything. So there's a lot of history in Wales.
Nice. Okay, so the just got a few questions here. Guys, go ahead and chime in at any time. You know, what kind of things you want to see us talk about. If you have any questions for Tony, this is our first live interview, of course. So you don't get any cuts or edits or anything like that. You know, it's different than making
It's
videos.
all raw.
Right. I mean, it's super raw. Like all the little pauses when you're editing videos, every little, like, you can collect yourself and say, okay, and then read the question, and then you just cut that bit out, you know. But during the live stream, it's like it's all right here, you know. So guys, Tony, what is so as far as challenges, what's the most challenging garden project that you've ever undertaken, and was it rewarding to you?
So we use allotments here in the UK, our gardens. We don't have massive yards like America does. So we use an allotment, which is like a community garden. And I literally had to pick up all of my stuff and move it to where I am now. Literally. So it was like 10 years worth of garden beds and polytunnels and everything else. I had to dismantle it all and bring it all to where I am now and then rebuild all that. So it's quite a large project. If anybody's seen my channel, they'll see just, you know, what I've got going on there. And I may be doing that again. So probably the first people to know that. So that's why at the moment I'm not growing much through the winter, because I'm not quite sure of where or when that's going to happen, you know.
Okay, so in the UK, you guys grow on allotments. I always hear everybody talk about the allotment. Can you describe what that is to us, to
So
Americans
it's like,
who have no idea?
it's a patch of land that is usually owned or leased by the local council, and they section it up into either rods or poles, but effectively it's a small parcel of land. You rent that land in which to grow on, but there's a lot of rules you have to follow around around using that site, which is one of the reasons that I may be moving. But yeah, there's a lot of rules there, and it's literally a community garden. So there may be, on mine, for argument's sake, there's something like 85 different plots. And I have 3 full-size ones all next to each other, so they're quite large. It's quite a large allotment. It's 0.4 of an acre is the land that I'm gardening on at the moment.
Ooh, almost a half acre. Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And so I heard you. I heard you say there's a lot of rules, and that's maybe one of the
huge amounts of rules. So you're not allowed to make any profit. So if I was, for argument's sake, I grew salad leaves and I wanted to sell those on, I couldn't do that. My poultry, I'm not supposed to sell eggs from that. You can't do anything like that with these allotments. You are very restricted. Some of them won't allow you to have polytunnels. Some won't allow you to have sheds. It really depends on the site. Now, ours is self-managed, meaning that the council have sort of, they've basically said, you set up an association, you manage it, so you make your own rules at that point. So we're able to have a little bit more than some are, but each site is separate as far as the rules. They make the rules up as they, for the site, if you get my drift. So some sites you can't have a polytunnel or a greenhouse, and then others, like mine, you can have polytunnels, sheds, things like that, as long as they're tidy and you're cultivating most of the ground.
And are there any rules as far as soil cultivation? I mean, like as far as chemicals used or overspray or anything?
Nothing like that. There's no rules along that. Now, I'm organic, so no chemicals touch my ground at all. But obviously, if someone is on plots further down and they spray and it's a windy day, that can have an effect, But I'm as organic as I can be on an allotment site. But I'm quite a big believer in that the microbial life and the soil life is what actually gets you the great crops, and working on building that soil. So I've been doing that, and I do a lot of it, so I go way overboard compared to most. A prime example is ready as a carbon source for my next load of compost. I've just brought in nearly 2 tons of straw. So,
Nice.
Yeah, so I take it a bit more serious than a lot of people. Some people think I'm mental when I'm doing it,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so you say as organic as possible. Can you explain what that means? I mean, like what do you use?
Yeah,
that was one of the questions people.
Everything I use is organic based. I don't use anything to do with chemicals at all. But obviously, if someone that's 3 plots down sprays, well, and wind carries that up. So I wouldn't get certified organic because people around me are spraying and things like that with chemicals. Right. Yeah, but effectively, so that's as organic as I can be in the situation I'm in. When I do move, I'll be permanently organic. There'll be nothing around me, so then there won't be an issue. But I don't garden with chemicals at all. Everything, all my feeds, everything that goes on that land, all the seed, everything is organic.
Very nice. Well, let's just explore that just a little bit further. So what do you using bags of amendments? Do you make compost tea, or is it all basically compost? Is that your main thing?
No, compost is probably my main thing, but I do worm castings. We'll make leaf mold. I've got about 3/4 of a ton of leaf mold there at the moment. I'll make compost teas, comfrey tea, nettle tea, all of those sorts of inputs rather than going to buy it. I don't like bag soil because here in the UK, they are trying to make peat illegal. So the compost companies are now shredding up all sorts of stuff, including things like chipboard and things like that. And that is ending up in the composts, and it's not very good. So I prefer to bring in any raw ingredients I can. So I've got a gardener who only looks after old age pensioners. He gardens organically, so I know all the grass he gives me is all organic, so I can put that along with manures that I have from an organic farm, along with like the straw I have from an organic farm. I can make my own compost with my own inputs, and I know that that's going to be as clean as possible.
Nice. We have a question from Graham, who is over in Ireland. It says, could you ask Tony if he uses rabbit and sheep manure and what way he uses it?
So rabbit and sheep manures, we'll use them from here if I can get hold of them. Sheep manure is easier than rabbits because there's not huge amounts of people keeping rabbits around here unless I'm going up the fields and collecting it. But it's not something that's going to burn the plants, so it can go just straight on the ground, and I tend to use it just as a top dressing. So I'll just, if I get hold of it, I'll just chuck it down as a mulch and just let that rot into the ground. I won't bother compost it.
Yeah, but you do make the tea out of it sometimes?
Yeah, I'll make the tea out of it, but I tend to do, when I'm making compost, I'll add lots of different stuff to the teas because, like I said, there's compost tea and then there's compost teas. What you put in is what you get out. Like my poultry, I will compost all of that. That you can't put that on the ground or make teas out of that. It's just too rich. So the poultry and the pigeon manures and things like that, well, that's all composted. It goes in as a green.
Nice. Can you talk? Okay, so we're getting some questions here, but I want to sort of complete the topic of fertility. So, can you explain to us? I know you're really big on composting and making your own compost. Can you explain to people, sort of in a nutshell, your composting system and what kind of things you like to add? What are the benefits? What's your philosophy behind composting? Why is it a cornerstone for you?
Right. Okay. So we talked about the biggest thing I see a lot with people is they'll go off, especially if they're using chemicals as a feed or something like that. They're buying these chemicals to feed their plants, and they get it all wrong in their head. They think they have to feed the plants, as in fact you're feeding the microbial life that's in the soil and all that soil life, the fungi and the protozoa and things like that. You're feeding that, and that is then producing the nutrition that the plants require, and it just makes much stronger plants. My composting system are built from Euro pallets, so they're about a meter square, something like that, I've built, it's literally just 3 pallets screwed together, and that creates one bay. And obviously then in the front of it, it's like a sliding 2 half doors so that I can get in and out of them. And that's just a single bay, and I have 9 of those that I'm composting in.
9?
Yeah, 9.
And
I'm making about 10 ton of compost a year.
Okay, wow. And so are you doing with the bays like that? Are you doing the style where you'll keep one bay open and flip it all into the next one when you turn it? Do you turn it? Is it hot composting or?
Yeah, so when I turn, it's a hot compost because hot composting will kill any pathogens. It'll kill all the weed seed and anything, and I'll compost everything. I'll compost couch grass, bindweed, dock leaves. Yeah, I'll compost a lot, and when you're hot composting properly, it will kill everything. But you need that cubic meter in volume in order to get the compost to get hot enough and stay hot enough, take it through the mesophilic and the thermophilic layers in order to get that heat up there. I only turn my compost once though. It's a lot of compost to be turning if you're without machinery, so I only turn it once, and the reason I turn it is compost is hottest at its core, and it gets cooler as it goes out to the outskirts of the compost. So in the center, the core has got hot enough that it's killed all those pathogens and seeds. Okay, so because of that, everything here is killed, but on the outskirts of it, it may not be. So what we want to do is turn it at once, put the outer parts into the center, and then that center goes on the out part, and that way everything's gone through that thermolytic layer, and it kills all of those pathogens and seeds at that point. And I've done an example. Danny, who's in the chat at the moment, he came up recently. I'd composted 4 rats that had been killed by a cat on site, and I put him in there, and within 6 weeks all I found was a little bit of fur and 2 bones that size. Everything else had gone, all down to the heat and the microbes that were generated within that compost.
Wow. So you find that to be enough turning to when you make the pile a square meter. Yes.
Yeah.
And then it will obviously reduce by what percentage, and then when do you flip?
It may. So when you're looking at the heat now, what I would say to people if they're looking at composting, the best thing you can ever buy yourself at about $6 or $7 is a thermometer, a compost thermometer, because you can watch the temperature. And when you're looking at the temperature, compost goes like a sine wave. It goes up and down like this, okay? So what you're looking for is for it to hit the peak, which is around about 70 Celsius. Okay, you don't want to get it much hotter than that. But once it gets to that, you'll start to see it when the oxygen starts to run out, it'll start to cool down. And on the cool down, that's telling you, now I need to turn that compost. Now, if you want fast compost, the more you turn it, the quicker that's going to compost. But there's a trade-off, because a lot of the carbon and the nitrogen is gassing off while you're doing this. So if you're not turning so much, you want it to go through that heating phase in order to be able to kill everything that's in there, the weed seeds and everything else. But you don't want to lose the majority of the nitrogen and things to gassing off, okay? So by turning it just once, you keep the maximum you need, but you still get the desired effect of killing everything. So you're looking for the top of this, the peak of this sine wave, and as soon as it just starts on the drop, that's telling you it's got one of 3 issues. Either it hasn't got enough oxygen, it hasn't got enough moisture, or it hasn't got enough food. If it hasn't got enough food, you're going to know that because obviously it's finished compost. So we can rule that out. So we've got oxygen or water that we need to think about. So just grab a handful of it, give it a squeeze. If you only get 1 drop or less out, you know it's at the right sort of moisture. And we know we need to turn it to be able to do that. And then once you turn it, you'll have another peak, which will come off the oxygen. And at that point, I know it's the outer and the inner has gone through that heating phase and the seeds are killed. I don't need to worry about it anymore. If I wanted it really quick, and I've made compost in as little as 18 days, but I'm not in a rush for that because I'm making like 4.5, 5 ton a time. So I do that twice a year, okay? And so I've got 6 months, and then I can let that compost mature so it can cool down. All the worms and everything else can move in at that point after it starts on the cool down, and then I just allow that to mature until I'm ready to use it. Like I said, Danny was over the other day. There's 5.5 ton of compost sat there waiting to come out so I can make the next batch.
Wow, nice. So when the compost, okay, so here, for example, when I do the hot compost piles, or when I do the compost piles, because I do many different kinds, slow compost, and in the kind that where you just drag it from the bottom and stuff, which I feel like makes the lowest quality compost actually, full of weed seeds. Yes.
Because what's happened is, if you think of the bottom is an outer layer. Mm-hmm. If the earth wasn't there, that would be the outside. So it doesn't hold the heat there because the heat is actually absorbed by the ground beneath it. So that hasn't hit the temperature desired to kill the weed seeds. So you need to turn it at least that once, so all the outer side goes back into the center of the new patch. So as you're pulling from the outside, you're creating the new center, and then all of the center goes on the outside last, and that way everything's gone through that. I don't get the weed seed from it, then it's dead. And I'll put in, if I've had weeds and they've all gone to seed, and it's got a huge seed head, it still goes in the compost.
Oh wow, man! I've not bring myself to do that quite yet, but my hot my
get
composting
it wrong
game,
and you'll know about it.
right? Yeah, that's why I do.
But
that,
this is what I say to people: if you're worried, if until you can get that, I've been doing it a very long time. Okay, if you're worried about that, don't put the perennial weeds in, don't put the seed in, right? And then just make it with everything else. But I compost everything because the perennials, they're like nutrient accumulators. They have huge deep tap roots that pull that nutrition out of usually the subsoils below, and they bring that up to the surface in effect, and you go and get rid of that and you're losing all of that nutrition. Whereas if you compost them, that nutrition's released back to the compost. And this is what I'm saying about a good quality compost that you just can't buy.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I do know this. I've seen commercial composting operations, and they are cutting every corner you possibly can to get the weight, the bulk.
It's all about turnaround and profits. And like I said, here I've seen them a couple of years ago. I put a post up with somebody who had bought a supermarket compost, and they had welts all up their hands from when they had their hands in the compost, and that was because of the fibers and stuff that were in that compost from things like chipboard and stuff that they were using as a bulking agent. Now, I'm not being funny, but compost shouldn't be doing that. It's just a basic soil. It shouldn't be creating those sorts of issues where you've got to wear gloves to put it out in the garden and stuff. And and these people are selling this stuff. I've got kids running around my garden. I don't want that. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Last kind of question about compost, and then we'll move on because I see a lot of other good questions here. All right. So, like for example, when I will set up the I'm trying to wrap my mind around how you only flip it once. Okay, because when I will set up the pile, it will get nice and hot, and I'll monitor it and everything, and it doesn't get above 160 and stuff. But then it will peak and then drop off. So within like 2 weeks, it's cooled back off again. So how long do you go before you have to turn it the first time?
So once it hits that peak, as soon as you see that drop off with about 5 or 6 degrees, I'm turning the compost.
So that's like in 2 weeks or less.
Yeah. So as soon as if I made a batch of compost today, I know within 2 weeks I'm turning that compost, and that's the last time I'll turn that compost till it's finished.
Wow. Okay.
Because like I said, I'm not in a rush to make compost because I think composts that are made within 18 days or a month or whatever, those composts are much less quality than the longer term composts. Okay. I want to take it through that heating phase. Okay. But I still get the benefits that you would normally get with a cold compost, because I'm not losing it all to the nitrogen and the carbon and everything into the atmosphere, because I'm only turning it once. It's going through 2 heating cycles, and that is it.
Okay. So you're initially hot composting it, but then it mellows out for a long time and does its thing slowly.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm understanding it. That makes sense.
And the only reason we're heating it is to kill the pathogens and the weed seeds. Once we've turned it the once, we've actually done that job, so we don't need to turn it anymore. And within 6 months, you'll have beautiful crumbly compost, and you'll have lots of it if you do it right.
Wow. Okay, that's wonderful to know, because just a few days ago, I completed the entire garden got put into the compost. 3 massive, but they're more like 5 by 5 feet.
Right, okay.
So 1.5 meters cubed, something like that. So
I find a 1 meter better, because the center of anything bigger tends to have an issue with holding enough air. So that's why I use a pallet bay, which is about 1 meter square, because by that point enough air can be held within the compost. It's used up too quick in a 1.5 to meter bays, and you can't, it's a lot of work to turn that then, so the likelihood is that you would probably need to turn that 2 or 3 times rather than just once.
Yes.
So just bear that in mind.
Right. And there's a lot more getting into that to get that into the center. There's a lot more.
Yeah. You're more likely to bring weed seed out of that. Okay. Because even if you're careful at turning it, the likelihood of getting everything into that center point at some point will be quite rare, unless you're turning on a constant basis. So if you're going to do this at home, I tell people, especially for home use anyway, stick to a 1 meter bay. It's better to have multiple bays.
Okay. Very good advice. Now, so then for these, because I've got 3 of them that are at least 5 square, that are 5 by 5 by 5 cubes, feet, meter and a half. And so would you say then that I would do that thing, monitoring the temperature, flip it, let it climb back up again. Then as soon as it starts to drop off, flip it again, maybe 2 or 3 times, and then let it rest.
Yeah, and then let it rest then. If you're not in a rush for that compost, like I said, I take compost twice a year. So I take it now, usually early January. So what I'm doing at the moment, because like I said, I may be moving, I don't know whether or not, I don't want to put all this compost on the ground, because I don't want to waste it, So what I'm doing at the moment now, I'm taking that out of the compost bays and piling that up, and I'll cover that over with a tarp so that I can use the compost bays to make more. Because the compost bays are designed, they even though they're pallet bays, they're actually wrapped in, I don't know if you guys have it there, but it's like a floor protection. It's like a polypropylene floor protection for when building works is going on. And I wrap the pallets in that because it helps retain the heat, and you don't need to worry about having air from outside because that cools the pile. So you're not worried about that. And what it does as well, then it stops rain entering, because arguably the most important thing about compost is getting the moisture content correct.
Moisture content correct. So do you find, but so you obviously keep it covered as it's brewing, or as it's making, and then...
so even though I haven't got a roof over them, because we were, like I said, this one of the rules, we can't have it at this site. Eventually I will build a roof over the new ones when I do move. So what I have is a piece of black plastic sheeting over the top, and then carpet on top of that to weigh that down. Okay. So, and nice. It's a wool carpet, so.
Man, okay, so I could just talk about composting all day, because I can tell you're very knowledgeable on this topic. And so
that's why I wrote the book.
Right. And I was just going to say that. So how can people find out more about that, your knowledge in composting? You got the book handy?
So the book's here. It's called Composting Masterclass, and it's a huge book, guys. So the quality of the paper is a little thinner than you would normally get on like my newer books, because there's like 130,000 words in here, where a typical book is like 50,000. And this goes into absolutely everything. We're talking about aeration, and it literally goes on to everything. So, look, you can see there, that's what the bins look like. So that they've been refurbed now, but you can see the black plastic flooring that's over the pallets.
And so that is not like a woven. That's a straight
that's
non-breathable.
Just like poly. It's just like a thin-walled plastic, and you just bend it around and what have you. But the book is available in all good bookshops. It's available in Amazon, and I go into. It's not a how to compost book, okay? This is quite in depth, and I go a lot into the microbiology, the soil life, and everything else around it. But for those that really want to know exactly how composting works and the processes that happen, and be able to problem solve and everything else, that's the book you want, because I take you through every factor that can have an effect on the compost, as well as obviously how to compost, you know.
Oh, that's wonderful. I had no idea that book was that in depth. I'm definitely getting that book.
Yeah, it's really, really in depth. It's not a beginner's guide, guys. So if you're looking for a beginner's guide, that's not a book for you.
Yeah.
That's why I call it Composting Masterclass. Eventually, I might bring out a beginner's guide or something like that. But I have so many videos on composting that, and I've got a load more that I want to make as well. I mean, you can make compost just from grass clippings. In fact, I've got some video footage where I was just storing it for a year, and the bottom like third of one of those bays was just pure compost, where they would just turn into compost. That's not ideal as a compost, because obviously you're limiting the ingredients that are in there. So, but at a push, if that's all you had, it would eventually compost down. The reason I'd done it was to show people that anything that was once living will compost down. It's why I put the rats in the compost, to show people. And because I know I can get it hot enough, I know any pathogens that were in those rats and is now gone, you know. The compost is the answer for a lot of people's problems.
Nice. Okay, so Look to Nature says, question for Tony. What are your favorite nitrogen sources to use in the compost?
So I use all sorts of things. Grass clippings I get lots of, like I said, from the gardener. I'll use coffee grounds. I've got an ex-firefighter who now owns a couple of coffee shops, so I go and pick coffee grounds up off him every week. And, you know, I might be picking up 20 pound of coffee grounds every week or something like that in weights, you know. So those would be some of the nitrogen sources. Obviously, I've got all of the garden waste that I make on like, you know, a fourth of an acre is quite a lot. I'll use pretty much anything, all the kitchen scraps that we've got. If I got friends that'll create kitchen waste, I'll take that. When I'm at the fire station, they'll give me that.
Now, how are you starting a compost pile using kitchen scraps, though? Because that's my issue. You continually add, or do you save them up?
So when everything is saved, right? So what you'll find, the reason I have 9 bins, I tend to make compost in 5 of them. I made it in 6 this year, but either 5 or 6 bins. I'll keep 2 for storage of greens, and I have 1 that is purely there for leaf mold. Okay. So at the moment, I have 2 of those bays, and it's just full of grass clippings and all the vegetable scraps and everything just end up in there. It doesn't matter to me if they start pickling or if it starts going anaerobic, because I'm going to introduce the air when I build the pile. Okay. And the good bacteria, the anaerobic bacteria will get rid of the aerobic bacteria will get rid of the anaerobic bacteria, because as soon as we add that oxygen, most of them will die off and the aerobic will take over and do the job as required. So, and the reason a lot of people can't get their compost hot is because they add to it constantly. So what I do is I will build a complete compost bay full in one day. It gets covered. And maybe when I do the next turn, because I'm doing multiple of these bays, when I do the next turn, that may have sunk by about a third. So I'll take a third out of one of the other bins to top it back up full again, because I'm maximizing the space. And eventually what happens is, because I've built them all the same day, they're all at the same stage. So I'm not like adding stuff that's partially broken down with stuff that's, you know, broken down a lot more, you know. So they're all at the same stage. So I can now just take like half a compost bay out of this one and top up 2 others. So, and by that way, by the time they've had the second turn, they have sunk, you know, as little as possible. So like the whole bay is pretty much full by about that much by the time the second bay, because I shred all of the compost waste first, which gets rid of most of the volume air that the air would be held in within it.
How?
And then So it depends what it is, but I have a shredding machine or a lawnmower. I use hand shears. It just really depends what it is.
And you just put your green material right through the shredder. Everything goes through the shredder.
Everything goes through the shredder or hand
This
shears
is an
or
awesome
whatever.
system.
The smaller the particle size is, the better your compost is, because you control the air and the moisture much better that way. You don't have air pockets. The microbial life can get around better because of the moisture is in contact with everything else, and you get less shrinkage because you've already taken a lot of that away. And then on the first turn, we can just top up from one of the other bins to bring it back up full again. And I'll slightly overfill the bin so that when it does shrink, I probably got about 8 or 9/10 of the bin or the bay left by the time the compost is ready to come out of there. Danny will tell you, he's in the chat, it's probably only shrunk about that much. And I've got 5 of those bays full, so I'm pulling out nearly a cubic meter out of each of those bays, so it's nearly about a ton in weight out of each of the bays.
Nice. Man, this is awesome. I mean, I've been composting for years, but there's so much more I can learn, obviously. This is great. So I can't wait to get that book.
And it's hard to put that into video sometimes, because, you know, it's you want a video to appeal to the most people.
Right.
And that type of video wouldn't. So, which is why I wrote that book. So, like I said, that book is for someone who's been composting, who really wants to take it to the next level, you know?
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure you find the same, but making a video that has to appeal to the algorithm and to people's attention span and stuff, you know, it's a whole different thing than if someone came to my class in person, you know, and I could have a long, you know, much more long and in depth, you know, discussion.
So I'm actually working on a course, which is the practical guide of this book. And then what that will do is it will allow people to see it in a practical version rather than, you know, all of the theoretical side behind it, you know.
And that would be like an online course with several videos and things that's sequential. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm working on several of those as well. Very cool.
I got quite a few of those going on at the moment, but I haven't.
What platform?
So I'm going to be using Kajabi.
Okay. I've heard of that one.
I did think of Teachable, but Kajabi allows me to do a lot more other stuff. So it would mean like my newsletter, I don't need to pay for separate fees for my newsletter like I would with Teachable. So I can combine that fee, and it allows me to do all sorts of other stuff. So eventually it'll allow a community and stuff like that, so it'll grow with me.
Wonderful. Man, this is just great. So, okay, well, we will in the future maybe have to have like a composting live thing. I mean, just focused on composting, because there's so many more questions that I will have, especially with this.
Oh, you can talk all year about composting. It's just it's so interesting when you get into it.
Definitely. But let's get on to some of the other questions. Serena here has a question. Since you are also the potato man, I would say the potato expert, based upon, I started watching your videos years ago, you know, about growing potatoes in containers and everything, you know, and I know a lot of people did.
They are like my most popular videos, I gotta say. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Well, and especially because you show the yields and just crushing it. You know,
I mean, not this year because of all the rain, but last year I pulled 450 pound of potatoes out of 200 square feet. So
200 square feet, yeah. And those are all in containers, right? On drip irrigation.
In containers, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So now I built the system. That's what the video was. It was showing people my system, and now I've built that system. It's so easy. I just get a container, chuck a bit of compost in, chuck my potatoes in, fill it up, put some mulch on it, put it in place, and put the actual sprinklers thing in it, and then I don't do nothing until I harvest it. It's that easy, you know.
Wow. So
no
what are you
digging,
feeding them?
Nothing.
You're feeding them just with compost?
No. So the compost goes in, which is my own compost most of the time. I put bloodfish and bone meal.
Okay.
And then through the season, I'll give 2 feeds, and it'll be one at the start of flowering time, which will be a seaweed feed. And then one where it's coming maybe closer to the end of the growing cycle for them will be another seaweed feed. Okay, so they get the slow release from the bloodfish and bone, and then the seaweed feed afterwards. But what I find with a lot of people is they take potatoes too serious. They look at the pack and it says, oh, this is an 18 to 20 week harvest. And at 18 or 20 weeks, they're pulling the potatoes and they've still got all these green homes on top. Why are we doing that when it's still growing? It's putting weight. That's the time it's putting the weight on the tubers. And it just... what I tend to say to people is, if you could, before you harvest the potatoes, wait until at least 50% of the foliage has turned yellow. And then at that point, just cut all the homes, leave them in the containers or in the ground, wherever you're growing them, then for a further 2 weeks for the skins to harden off, and then you can harvest. Okay, so potatoes I haven't harvested this year yet.
Yeah,
they're still in the containers.
Now, will your ground freeze completely solid? It doesn't freeze solid there, does it? I mean,
it froze solid the other day. We had a load of snow before we had the last storm, and in fact, when Danny came up, it's funny because Danny only lives about 45 minutes from me, and we have two different microclimates. Like mine is so cold, the ground had frozen quite hard, and but if we've been mild the last few years. But if we have a cold winter, that ground will freeze down a good 12, 14 inches.
Oh, nice. Okay, so it's kind of like here then.
We're a temperate zone 8A.
Oh, okay.
So that's equivalent.
Right, okay. So the Serena has the question that her potatoes, the blue Adirondack, are already chitting. What can I do to keep them from growing too much before March 17th is when she would plant them out, or should I just compost them?
No, don't compost them. Just break the chits off and leave them. They'll re-chit. But what you want to do is keep them cool and light. You don't want to be put them in a dark place, and you don't want to be keeping them warm. So if you can keep them down below sort of like 6 degrees, something like that, 5-6 degrees, then they're not really going to chit. The problem you're going to have now, Serena, is the fact that those potatoes have woken up. So the likelihood of you put them back into dormancy will be quite rare.
And so for that, you recommend then when you break, so if they're going to be the planting potatoes for next year, then you recommend breaking the chits off and placing them in a light area.
Off now, put them in a light and cool area, and they will re-chit. So,
okay. And the light will do what? Explain that.
So
why not keep them in the dark?
If they did chit, yeah, the chit is going to be very short and stumpy, right? It's going to be a strong chit. If you put them in the dark and they chit, and invariably when you put things in darks, it's in a cupboard or something like that, which tends to be warmer anyway, it'll grow a long, leggy white shoot looking for light. So it's using even more energy trying to find light. So those chits are really useless to growing potatoes. You want really short, stumpy, dark, either dark green or purple chits that they tend to put on. So light and cold is the best way to do that.
Very nice. Yes. Okay, so there is let's see. Question from Signal Law says, how does Tony feel about his water collection system now that it has been running for a while?
I love it.
Yeah.
So I collect 5,500 gallons of water. And funny enough, I was taking Danny around because he came over the other day.
Who is Danny again? You said he's in the chat. Does he have a screen name?
Yeah, he's got the Grow Up channel, so he should be in there for Grow Up. Okay, he came over the other day, and he's just taken on another new part of an allotment, and he's put an IBC. So I use IBCs. You guys know what they are, yeah?
Yeah.
So I have 21 of those built into my water catchment system. And every single one of them, so they've all based in different areas around the garden, so that I'm not walking any more than about 15 foot for water at any time. And every single one of them is linked to each other via underground pipework. I believe that rainwater's much better, so which is why I'm catching all of this water. I have a tap that's right outside my garden, which is mains water, but I prefer to use rainwater, and it's just such a good system. And then all I do, if I want to move the water from one to the other, I just drop in a small 12-volt bilge pump, and I'll just pump it right across, and I can empty one IBC into another in less than 6 minutes.
And what is it? I might have missed this. What is actually catching the water? Is it?
So I have 2 sheds. One is 17 foot by 20 foot. The other is 24 foot by about 20 foot. And I have 2 polytunnels, which are 36 foot by 18 foot each. So all of those structures are going into a total of 10 of the IBCs, and then from those 10 it's sent off to other IBCs as they fill up, and they all fill at the same time. So the tap at the bottom is connected with a pipework, so they all just fill up, and then I pump from there wherever I need it. It's a really good system. I have a video on it, taking people around exactly how it all works and stuff. Yeah, it's so good. Don't get me wrong, it's not cheap to buy all of this equipment, but to me, gardening's an investment. You put your time in. You know, I don't drink and smoke, so I spend my money on my garden because I just love doing what I do.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody in this chat can relate to that for sure. So that's going to be a move. If you do move, I mean, you're going to have to dig all that up, right, and reestablish.
This is why it was my biggest challenge before.
Right.
And even then, the water system I had back then was something like about 1,000 gallons, so maybe 4 or 5 of those IBCs. But they weren't. They didn't have the underground pipe work and everything else, which I've now dug into this. When I do go, I'll be taking everything with me, but I'll keep the site and I'll take it over slowly at bits at a time, so that I'm right. But I got to move 2 polytunnels. I got to move the 2 sheds. And they're big sheds as well. You know, they've been hand built sheds and stuff. I've got solar at the garden, so all of that's why a 12-volt pump rather than anything else, and I use that for all sorts of stuff. So
wow, man, this just sounds amazing. So we've got one from Teets, $5. Thank you very much for the contribution, my friend. He's got a question, says, I have a much smaller compost pile. If I add chicken manures, how long until I can use it? And will pine needles / wood hurt my compost pile?
No. So all of it can go in. That's not a problem. See, this is a great thing about composting things, because the microbes, even if the pH, say for argument's sake, pine needles made it acidic, which they don't, but it's just for argument's sake, this is one of the things that people worry about making their compost acidic. The thing about the microbiology in the soil is that it actually neutralizes a lot of this, and it puts it back to a neutral sort of 6.8 to 7 on the pH scale. So once it's matured compost, you will always find it'll be around about a 6.8 to 7 on the pH scale. Okay. Wood, the only difference with wood is you need to make sure that you get a 30-to-1 blend in your compost. So if you're putting in like wood chips, that's fine, but bear in mind that they're going to take down a lot longer. They have a lot more lignin in, so it's harder for the microbes to break down. So you need to add that much more nitrogen, because the carbon, although it will gas off, it's actually it's not replaced, whereas the nitrogen's replaced. So as microbes feed on each other and they poop and everything else, that nitrogen is released back into the actual compost, but carbon isn't. It's actually utilized. That's why you get that loss and that shrinkage. It's because they're consuming the carbon. But like pure wood chips would take a lot longer to break down. What I tend to do, if I want a good carbon source, is I use wood chips in my path, and then I dig my paths out at the end of the year, and I use that as my carbon source, and the new wood chips go down in my path. So by that point, it's been rained on, walked on, and everything else. It's already started that rotting down process. So that's an ideal ingredient to add then, rather than just pure wood chip. Pine needles, not a problem. They can go into.
So then where does the carbon go?
So the carbon is actually consumed by all of the microbial life. So, and it's burned as an energy source. So like you take carbs, so you'd eat pastas and things, your body's going to use that as an energy source before it starts using the fats of your body. It's exactly the same thing for the microbes. So they're consuming this carbon and the body is using it as an energy source. It's where the heat comes from. Okay, so so as the microbial population grows, they're consuming more and more carbon, and this is why you actually need a 30-to-1 ratio in carbon to nitrogen, because you want finished compost to be around 10-to-1. Which when you put that on your soil, so this is why we add a 30-to-1. You need that to be able to get things moving.
Wow. Okay, man, I could really talk a long time for this. But okay, so do you specifically manipulate the pH of your soil?
So there's only a couple of places I'll do that. Things like my blueberries. Okay, like if I was growing azaleas, things like that, yeah, then you need an acidic soil. So I would manipulate the soil for that. And
in what way?
So I'd use whatever I could. Like I've mulched Christmas trees and I've had really good effect on that. But there's all sorts of ways you can do it. You can use a pH booster. So like you could use like a copper thing that'll bring it down, or you can use lime to bring it up. There's all sorts of things you can use. I tend to pick organic versions though, so if I can, I will make an ericaceous compost, which is an acidic compost, and then I'll use that, which will help lower the ground soil, because my blueberries I don't grow in pots, I grow them in the same beds as everything else, and I'll just mulch them with the ericaceous composts.
Okay.
So there's sulfurs and things like that you can use in to lower the soil pH. But I tend to try not to go down that road if I can. But it's used a lot when you're making ericaceous composts.
Can you briefly explain that, the ericaceous compost? What's
So
that?
ericaceous compost is just an acidic compost, and it's usually between sort of 5.5 and 6.5 in the pH range. And it tends to be made up with a lot of things that would technically be acidic. So it'd be lots of citrus in there. There would be lots of pine needles, things like that. So it's made with all of the acidic sort of ingredients that you would not necessarily put in your main compost. I do, but a lot of people say not to add them. But I add everything. I'll add diseased plants, everything to my compost, because I know I'm killing everything off, right? But all of the acidic stuff, if I want to make an ericaceous, I keep all of that for that, and then I'll adjust then with sulfur or with lime if I need to get it into the right area. But I tend to aim for like 5.5 to 6.5 for like the blueberries and stuff, and you only need to do that like every couple of years. It's not like you need to do it all the time. And I think I harvested something like 28 kilos of blueberries this year, so I must be doing something right.
Nice. So, okay, I don't know if you guys have these trees here, but we have black walnut trees. Are you familiar with that tree? And that it produces
familiar. It's not good for the ground, so I don't. I stay away from it. Yeah,
absolutely.
We do have them, but they're quite few and far between here.
So, what is your thoughts on the active ingredient juglone that does the suppression, the allelopathic effects? What is your understanding? Is that denatured in the compost process? Would you use compost from black walnut leaves?
No, I probably wouldn't.
Okay.
And I think that is probably one of the only things, that and some of the broadleaf herbicides that are used for cattle and for horse pastures that tend to go through the composting process, because they're not affected by the heat. In there, they tend to pass through that heating phase.
Yeah, we're well aware of that.
So we keep them out. So which is why when you're sourcing any external ingredients for composting, you want to be able to ensure that it's organic, or they haven't used like aminopyralides, things like that, as a broadleaf pesticide or herbicide or whatever the case. The other thing that people want to be considering as well is whether the bovines or the equines places that you're getting it from is not using like antibiotics and medication and things, because that can pass through the composting process as well. So source your ingredients from somewhere you know it isn't using those, and it's not something you ever have to worry about.
Absolutely. Yep. That's the exact message that I promote as well to everybody. So the question here from Aaron Johnson: will using the black walnut wood in my stove and then using the ash in the compost, what are your thoughts on that?
I still wouldn't use it. I think that would, like I said, it can get through the heat. And I think what you're actually going to do is end up those undesired traits are going to come through into the ash, and they're going to actually be compounded. So I think it's actually going to make it worse. I wouldn't use the ash from it either.
Okay, then that is the end of story as far as that goes.
Get away from black walnut, just leave it alone. There's so many other trees and stuff out there that you don't need to worry about it.
Right. Okay, good. Because I've been on the fence about it a little bit, don't have enough experience with actually composting it. I do have experience with trying to grow near them, but I will say this is it.
I've seen it go through the composting process when my grandfather done it when I was younger. Because he had a small holding with some black walnut trees, and he tried composting it, and the next year everything was just constantly dying and what have you, and it took about 5 years to work out of the soil because he dug the compost into the soil, so it really damaged it. And even as a small kid, that's one lesson I learned straight away, and I just stayed away from it. So I wouldn't take anything that has it now. I would just be rejected straight away.
Okay.
I haven't got 5 years to waste.
Right. Absolutely not. No, that is the end of story as far as I'm concerned with jug loan. Okay. Wonderful. So do you have experience with Bokashi? So
yes. In fact, there's a section on Bokashi in here.
Of course.
Where I do quite a fair bit of Bokashi, but even when I've done Bokashi, I still add that then to my compost.
Okay, so Michael, right, of course. So Michael says, I've been filling Bokashi buckets and storing up enough of them to build my pile, and then I empty the Bokashi buckets for my nitrogen source. Is this a good idea?
Yeah, so Bokashi is a ferment, right? So it's a ferment. So basically what's going on there is anaerobic first off, but once you're building your compost pile, remember we spoke about earlier on, that compost is going to be aerated, so therefore the anaerobic bacteria are going to die off and the aerobic are going to take over, and that's why I add it. And again, I add it as a nitrogen source. I'm just trying to find the area. So we talk quite a bit on Bokashi in here, look. So, and what we see is a lot of people, they worry about Bokashi when you get the white mold growing on it and stuff like in there. So the white mold is really good for Bokashi. But if it turns like a grey or green mold, then it's time to not use that. Okay, so
you wouldn't use that in the compost?
I wouldn't use that even in composting then.
Whoa.
Because there's a pathogen in the grey and green mold, I forget the name of it at the moment, that actually goes through the composting process, and it can actually make it quite sick. So if you're Bokashi, and for Bokashi to work right and get the white mold, it needs to be without air. And the biggest problem people have is they don't compress the Bokashi. So when you're putting the veg in, they just leave air in there, and then they put the bran over the top. You've got to compress that down. You've got to exclude all the air out of it. And then you won't have that green or grey mold growing.
Now, you're talking about green or grey mold from Bokashi, right? Because other green and grey
only.
molds are obviously fine.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's just the Bokashi process because of the fermentation. I forget the name of the bacteria that is caused, but it goes through the composting process and it can make you quite ill. So I do talk about it in the book, about getting all the air out of the Bokashi, then put your layer of bran, because that will prevent that ever happening. But the white mold is fine.
Okay, so then describe a scenario where it would be advantageous for me to even use Bokashi. Or, I mean, is it advantageous
Yeah, it's
to?
advantageous because not everybody has space for compost bays or even enough ingredients to compost. And, you can still make compost from Bokashi going through its own process. It's going to be anaerobic, but you can still make compost from that as a nutrient source for, plants on a balcony or something like that. So there are situations that people can use it. I have a bin that is chock-a-block up there at the moment, and I'll just dump that then into my compost bay when I make the next mix. The reason it's good is because you're already starting the composting process and you're retaining all of those nutrients rather than just dumping it in a compost bay and waiting for you to make, where those nutrients could be leaching away. You're containing them. And then you could put that in an extra bucket and go off, make another area. And then when you make it, use it as a nitrogen source, like one of the viewers was saying earlier on, I forget the name, sorry.
Michael.
Michael, yeah. So by doing that, you are retaining all of the nutrition in that bucket. So then all that nutrition then goes into the compost as a nitrogen source, rather than just dumping it into with like the grass and allowing it to leach out with rain. And when it breaks down, all those waters are released to have nutrition in that soaks into the ground. So compost is really good for absorbing this stuff, but obviously Bokashi is really good for holding the kitchen scraps, the nutrition till you want to make it. If you're just doing a slow add as you go, not a problem. You could just keep adding scraps like that. But that's why I Bokashi. But again, I explain a lot of that in the book.
Okay. Wonderful. And so, because I do get that question a lot, and my take on it, because I've experimented in the past, but it's like just an additional step for me. It seems like an additional step. So I'm just trying to decide.
It can be, but like I said, it has the book was designed to incorporate all sorts of composting and like even trench composting and things like that, and explain the ideas behind it all, how it all works. Okay, so Bokashi had to be in there, and it has its place. Like I said, there may be someone who doesn't have a garden but has a balcony and has some potted plants or something on the balcony. Well, they could be turning their kitchen scraps into an anaerobic compost, albeit, but it's still got all that nutrition in it that they could be top dressing their plants with or whatever once it's fermented.
Okay.
So there are uses for it, and like I said, I use it because I generate quite a lot of kitchen waste, and also I have it from the fire station when the guys are cooking as well. They save their waste for me, so I have quite a lot of that, and then I'll put it through the Bokashi because I may not be making another batch of compost for 6 months. So I'll just store that in sealed containers.
Okay.
And then it becomes a nitrogen source.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot more sense when you're starting bulk batches of the compost.
Yeah, I make 5 or 6 ton at one time.
Right.
All in one day, all at the same time. So I store the ingredients. Like I said, I got about 2 ton of straw there at the moment. You know those big bales that the round bales of farmers? Yeah, 2 of those.
Oh yeah.
So I got plenty of carbon source there, but most of that'll end up in this next batch.
Okay. So we have another question about potatoes. Those I'm just curious. Those round bales there, how much do they cost where you're at?
I think they're about 20 quid, something like that, £22.
Oh, okay. For the round bales.
Yeah,
oh, nice.
For a round bale. But I didn't pay for them. These were 2 bales that had got slightly damp because the farmer hadn't wrapped them. He stored them in a shed, not a shed,
kind of spoiled.
So they'd spoiled. He couldn't use them, and he called me up. Do you want them? And he even brought them to me. The problem is, where I was, I had to break them up because obviously they're so big. They're like 5 feet or something. So I had to break them up till I could roll them through the gap that I've got going onto the garden, and the rest of it's all piled in, so it's all covered over at the moment. In fact,
nice.
I think
That's a workout, rolling and things. I know that.
Mate, I tell you, I think I've got a photo.
That's no joke.
Now in a moment.
I'd use boards and all.
All sorts.
Yeah.
So that was they were the bales that came.
Yep. There you go.
And I had to and that was it after unwrapping, and that's right across some of the gardens. They're covered now, obviously. So you can see where it's covered there now, ready to go. You can see some of the compost there, look.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lots. Wow.
So this is an old bay.
Beautiful.
This is where I'm storing stuff. That's where I'm storing stuff. So, but yeah, it's, it's a free source, and
of course.
I'm not going to say no to that.
Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful.
And it's from a source I know to be organic.
Very important, yeah. And I'm sort of discovering that I'm liking doing that with the straw, because straw here is pretty cheap, and so we'll get straw, and then I put it in the aisleways, and then took it all and used that as the carbon to hot compost.
Yeah.
And that's turning out to work really good
as well. So the poultry will do their bit on it, and they'll go in as well. As a carbon/nitrogen source. Then a lot of people don't realise that ingredients have both carbon and nitrogen in. So when they're mixing them, sometimes they can get them quite wrong, because it's like your typical garden weeds are already a 30-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio, but yet they're included as a nitrogen ratio or as a green. So sometimes if the bin was all full of that and then they added lots of carbon as well, then it's over carboned, and that's why it takes a lot longer to get going.
Oh, yes. Okay. That makes perfect sense, because you would think that a garden weed would be a pure green. You would say, well, that's a green, so I need 30%.
You'd think that.
Right.
I've got in here, I've got an actual table of all of the different types of, I'm just seeing if I can find it a bit quick, all the different types of things you could use and what they are as far as carbon to nitrogen ratios. And that, there we are, there it is. So,
okay, nice.
So you can see there all of the different ingredients. So you can see like some of them are already like 11-to-1 and 12-to-1 and things like that. So basically, like grass clippings, the carbon to nitrogen ratio is 12 to 25-to-1. So basically, it's already 12 parts carbon in there to 1 part nitrogen, but we need a 30-to-1, and that's why we need to add so much more carbon. But people don't realize that. They take nitrogen, grass as just nitrogen, all of these ingredients. So you can really delve into the weeds, to excuse the pun, but like I said, for most people, we base it on layers, and maybe you put like a 5-inch layer of carbon into a 1-inch layer of nitrogen when you're layering and things like that, just to make it easier for them to understand.
Right, and that is the whole purpose of the layering process, is just to visually, to make sure you have the ratios correct.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, absolutely,
Yes, okay. Okay, Jason has got a question. It says, I grow my potatoes in 30, 45, and 100-gallon grow bags. Why is it that all the potatoes I harvest are only in the top 6 inches up in the bags, even though I plant some of them very close to the bottom?
Okay, so there's 2 reasons for it. Firstly, the plants that they're going to be growing up, okay, you got 2 types in the States. You got determinate and indeterminate potatoes, okay? So your determinate potatoes only grow on a single layer. And what they're going to do, before they're going to push the hulls through the surface before they push out the root system that's actually going to hold those potatoes. That's why they're at the surface. If you grow an indeterminate, that grows on multiple layers throughout the soil. And if you plant them closer to the bottom, they will throw out root systems throughout that stem that will push out potatoes right throughout. But if you're growing in containers and bags and things like that, this is why I say with determinates you can actually use 4-seed potato. I use 30 litres, which is equivalent to 8 to 10 gallons, okay?
That's how big your pots are? 10 gallons?
Yeah.
Wow, that seems real small.
Yeah, and the reason for that is you're maximising the amount of compost that's required not to dry out and to hold enough nutrition, while being able to provide enough for the potatoes. So 2 seed potatoes will go in one of those containers for main crop, which is your indeterminate. And your determinates, I'll use 4 seed potatoes. And the reason for that is they tend to be smaller potatoes. And because they only grow on a single layer, we can plant 2 in the bottom and 2 up, about 2/3 the way up. And that way then you get 2 layers of potatoes growing, yeah? So that's why you're having that issue. The likelihood is it's the variety you're growing is probably a determinate potato, and they're growing at the top level because they've pushed the homes through, and then they go, right, okay, now we can send out the root system.
Okay, so that's really interesting to me, because I have experimented extensively with determinate and indeterminate potatoes, and all I've ever found is for the only part that is different is the above ground. The indeterminate potatoes grow in like a long, scraggly vine, whereas the determinate grow more in a bush. But I've never found, even through experiments, I've never seen them grow not more than just a couple inches above the first seed potato. Is that?
Yeah, so I don't know why that is for you guys, but everything that I've found in all of the experiments I've done, that's how it works through in the containers and in the ground that I've grown in here. Every single time, indeterminate will grow on multiple layers throughout that soil, and a determinate only grows on that single layer.
And so you will get potatoes at every level, at every. So if you buried the like 2 feet, if you kept adding soil and buried it like 2 feet, would you get potatoes all the way up?
Yeah, so
to where the soil is.
My containers, I think they're like, I think they're something like 19 inches high from bottom to top, and so I'll plant. For your indeterminates, I'll plant 2 seed in the bottom of that container, and I'll get potatoes from the very bottom and pushing through the soil surface at the top. That's why I have to put a straw mulch on the top. So
wow,
I take 15 pound of potatoes out of a single container.
Wow, man, there's so much to learn. I mean, it can just keep on learning. That's just crazy, because that's completely new to me.
It's I've to make things easier for people as well. If they go to simplifygardening.com / potato, hang on, bear with me, I'll tell you. Let me just pull it up a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Give me 1 minute.
Yeah.
Because I want to get it right.
So to finalize his question, would you say that the reason he's experiencing that the potatoes are only at the top 6 inches is why?
Yeah. So it's either that he is, it's either that he's using just determinate potatoes, or they are being pushed up somehow before they're actually before they're rooting. So, but everything that I've ever done is. That's how it's gone with potatoes. If folks go to simplifygardening.com / potato-tool, there's a tool there that I designed that you can put in any of the potatoes that you're looking to grow, and it'll give you all the characteristics of that potato. So whether or not it's determinate, indeterminate, how long to grow, how far apart they should be planted, how deep to plant, how long to harvest, what they can be used for. So when you go to that tool, it may ask you for a password. There's a sign-up form that people can go, and I'll give you a link for that, and maybe you can put that out later, or put it as a comment or something to help people out. It's totally free for people to use.
Yes, email that to me after this, and I will put it in the video description as soon as we're done here. As soon as I get that email, I'll put it in the video description.
Yeah.
And could you say it one more time?
So the actual web page, once they sign up, they'll be taken to this, but it'll ask them for a password, you see, because it's password protected, all right? But it's simplifygardening.com / potato-tool.
Okay. Got it. Very nice.
But I'll give you the sign up thing, and basically all it is a name and an email address. It sends you a password, and then once you've put that password in, it's open to you all the time. And there's multiple ways you can search in this. You can search with just a potato variety, or you can go in there and select, I want to know about all the potatoes that are determinate. and it'll pull up all the potatoes that are determinate that's in the database. If anybody comes across a potato variety that's not in the database, there's an email below that they can send me, and then I'll get that added to the database for them.
Nice.
But that will just help people in understanding what whether their potato is a first early, second early, main crop, determinate or indeterminate.
Okay, very good, because that's always the question. Now, there's another great question here. Have you ever had any issues with potato scab having your compost too rich?
Right. So scab isn't really about too rich a compost. It's more about irregular watering. So if you allow the potatoes a time when they're forming to dry out, that tends to be when you get scab. So if you keep the water in regular and the compost doesn't dry out or the soil doesn't dry out, then you won't have scab. I have had it. Scab's not an issue. You can peel it off just like any other issue, but they're scab resistant varieties, and again you'll be able to find them in that database, so that can help you if you're having issues with that, but it's more of a water issue rather than a compost issue.
And what are your thoughts on using wood ash for potato soil?
Wood ash is a really good potassium and phosphorus additive. You can add it, but I would probably just mix it into the lower layers below where the potato's going to sit, and I wouldn't sit the potato on that, and then if the potato wants to send a root system down into that, then it can do and take it from there. But what you need to do with potatoes, a lot of people don't get this, it has two phases like a lot of plants that grow, okay? It has this vegetative phase, and then it has this flowering and fruiting phase. So when you need to provide enough nitrogen so that the potato grows good haulms, you want to maximize those haulms, but you don't want to maximize them to the extent where it actually is producing haulms over tubers. So as soon as it starts to go to the flowering phase, that's when potatoes start bulking, and you need to switch the feed from a nitrogen based over to a phosphorus and potassium based feed. That might be good then as a dusting, a surface dusting, to do before watering, to allow that to take down at the flowering or fruiting phase rather than putting it in the soil in the beginning.
Okay, so then you would say that, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but there is a gardening sort of online sort of thing. You can't use wood ash with potatoes because it will make potato scab.
Like I said, potato scab is down to a watering issue, okay, most of the time. And I've used wood ash loads, even in the mix, and never had scab on it. So, but again, you're likely to cause scab if you're damaging the actual skin of the potato, and if you're allowing that to dry out and you've got wood ash in there, then they're going to burn, right? So the water is key for a lot of things, not just because it keeps them hydrated. It also helps move any microbes around. It allows the absorption of nutrients and all the feed that you're giving them. It helps to break down the slow release feeds that you've put in there. And if you're allowing them to dry out, when you're allowing it to dry out, what's happening is the potatoes have sent out really fine root systems. They're feeder roots, okay? They rot off when you allow the compost to dry out. And then it has to grow it back before they can start taking on the proper nutrition it needs again. So you check the plant at that point, and that's when the scab issue happens.
Okay, so consistent watering is very important.
Yeah, really important. And you don't want to saturate the soil, because that can be just as bad because you cause rot. Okay, but they do need to be watered regularly and moist, and not allowed to be completely dried out. And the best test for anybody is stick your finger up to this knuckle here, and if you pull it out and you've got any compost sticking to your finger, it's moist enough. Yeah. If you start putting it in, it starts feeling dry and it's coming up with nothing on it, it's time to start watering. And when you water once, leave it 15 minutes and then water again until the water's running out to the bottom of the container. And that way, because compost goes hygroscopic when it dries, so it'll shed water. So people think, oh, I've got water running out my container now, I've got enough moisture in here, and it hasn't, because they allowed it to dry out, so it shed the water, and it hasn't absorbed anything. So you water it once, and then you go back 15 minutes later when it's had a chance to absorb that, and then water again, and it'll take on that second lot much easier, and then it's hydrated.
Very good. So for your potato system, then, which of course we all will watch the videos that you have on that. Are you relying on the rain? So is it on like a timer, a set system, or do you just water it when needed?
So although it's on drip irrigation, okay, I'm at the allotment all the time, okay? I'm never going to just leave it on drip irrigation because on a timer, for argument's sake, because if it rained the night before and I didn't know about it, those containers are going to be already saturated to as much moisture as they can take. And then if I go and add more water, I'm saturating the container even more, which is even worse for those containers, okay? So I'm at the garden every day anyway. I'm just going to go there, I'm going to stick my finger in. No, that's still moist enough, I don't need to add any water. Oh, that's getting a bit dry, let's water them all now, And then I'll just literally put a 12-volt battery in the pump system for the irrigation, and I'll just set it and leave it on for 10 or 15 minutes, dripping away, and that'll be enough for it.
Okay.
The drip irrigation saves a lot of water as well, guys. So if you're having to produce your own water for it, or you're low on water, then drip irrigation is a fantastic way, because it gives that water time to be absorbed rather than it just going straight from the top to the bottom. Like with these house plants behind me, there's no soil in any of these. They're all grown in things like orchid bark and perlite and things, and the water will run straight through to prevent root rot. But that's effectively what would happen with compost if it was allowed to dry out.
Yes, and I say that same thing as well when I explain to people the benefit of drip lines over hand watering. I mean, hand watering is nice, but flooding it with all that water at once, it runs out. It doesn't absorb in there like those drips.
Absolutely, and also then you're knocking soil-borne disease into the air. Onto leaves and things like that. So things like alternaria and things like that, you're knocking out of the soil up onto the lower leaves. So it's really good to have a mulch and then use a drip irrigation if you can.
What's your favorite mulch?
I like rapeseed straw.
Okay. So I don't know if we have that here.
It's effectively all it is. You'll see it on top of all of my potato containers. And literally,
it's real
just
fine.
Little pieces are very fine. And what that does, it mats enough that it doesn't blow away, but it absorbs a lot of water and holds it. So if it makes container gardening much easier, because if for any reason that soil did start to dry out, that mulch will then release that water into the soil. So it's a good way of preventing the containers getting oversaturated, because the straw will absorb any excess that hasn't drained out. So it's really good for that. And even though it mats, it doesn't mat enough that the homes won't push through it. So it's really good for that.
Wonderful. Tony, where can people find more about you? What upcoming projects do you have? You got books? Where can they find it?
So they can, I've got various books out. I think there's 21 online at the moment. This is my newest one. So this is, is on 50,000 words or so. So it's much higher quality, like I said. Simplified Vegetable Gardening is available in all good bookshops and on Amazon. So are these, and so are the 21 other ebooks and stuff that I've written. They can find me on YouTube at Simplified Gardening. They can find me on all socials at Simplified Gardening and simplifiedgardening.com.
Tony, you're
much all over the place.
Right. Yeah, you're all over the place. 21 books. That's blowing my mind. I can't even get my stuff together enough to write the first one. But
you can do
it'll get there. Yeah, it'll get there eventually. So, Tony, you're a true master. I mean, your level of knowledge and understanding of the craft is high level. So I
I've
really
had
appreciate
42
this.
years to work on it.
Right,
And
right.
one thing I tell people is, you learn far more by making mistakes than you ever will by succeeding. So, I've just made a lot of mistakes and you learn from them. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, well, I really appreciate you coming on, man. This has been
yeah, it's
awesome,
been a
very, very
pleasure.
informative, and I'm gonna watch
Thank
the
you.
whole thing again. I got tons of my own questions answered, a lot of things settled. A lot of things a lot of things that have been settled in this podcast. So we hope to have you on again in the future, perhaps. And
Always a pleasure to come back on.
yeah, all right, man. Well, thanks a lot, Tony.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye, guys.
Like.
Bye-bye.
Not sure how we. Okay, remove. Okay, guys, that was amazing. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So guys, that was awesome. Can you hear me still? I don't know if the sound was all kind of off, but that was everything I could have possibly hoped for an interview to be. Super knowledgeable guy. The composting, the first thing I'm going to do is order that composting masterclass book because we can never learn enough. We can always keep on learning. And so, especially when you find someone that really understands their craft. And I got the feeling immediately that Tony does, as I'm sure that all of you did as well. So that was a great experience, guys. If you guys want to see other people on the chat like this or other people, like this, then put the bug in their ear. Let me know who I should get on the show. Maybe Gardner Scott, because he was in the chat. David the Good, maybe some other ones. Maybe put the bug in their ear. Say, hey, you should be on the Garden Like a Viking show. That would be great. We could get some more knowledge from other people. I can't say that they'll all be that cool, as good as this one, but definitely. So yes, look, Graham says, love that. Still trying to take it all in. Every day is a school day. Oh man, me too. I'm definitely watching this one again because so many questions answered. Pilar says, you had a lot in common with him, Nate. Same philosophy, etc. And yes, David the Good is fun. Definitely. Yeah, I could tell, me and Tony have a lot as far as our understanding and our practices and the philosophy. You can just tell when you vibe with somebody and everything. If I ever go to Wales, guess who I'm checking out? Yeah. So, okay, guys, let's see here. Urban Gardener. Yes, he's got a show right after this. And I think Tony's going to be on the Urban Gardener channel here in a couple weeks. So stay tuned for that. And we will see what we can do. But guys, stay tuned for some garden renovation updates and stuff and you will see it. But the thing has totally been transformed, so it was awesome. So guys, I really appreciate you being here for this first ever guest interview live stream. Lisa says the sound was great. Brian Airy, Jay Dixon, Iowa Viking says that was amazing. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Simplify Gardening says you definitely need Scott. Yes, definitely. And I want to find out, okay, what's Scott's area of real expertise? Like, what does he specialize in? Like, Tony clearly specializes in compost and potatoes. I mean, as far as you can just tell. So I wanted to draw that out, and get that knowledge. So what are the other people, we can definitely explore this. I'll email them and see if you guys would like to have them on and we can do this more often. That would be great. Yeah. So don't forget to like the button or hit the like button, guys. Share this with anybody. And if there's a sound issue, I apologize for it, but we're just doing, what we can with what we got. I mean, we just are making it happen. Simplify says, come and visit, Nate. You're always welcome. Guys, that'd be a great in-person collaboration. We'd love to come check it out. Definitely. And so Simplify Gardening says he'll be on the Urban Gardener channel next week. So yes, check that out. Mountainside Homestead says, I don't think I've ever seen his channel, but I will be watching now. Definitely. It's one of the originals. Gardner Scott says, great show, Nate. Thank you, my friend. We'll have to get you on the show sometime. I'll email you and we'll see if you're open to it and maybe what we would talk about. That would be great. So, okay, guys. Well, thank you very much for participating. And this was an awesome chat. We'll be right back here next week at the same time, same place. So have a good week. B. Hendricks says that was a tight one. I haven't heard that word in a long time. Tight. Man, that was tight. Thanks. All right, guys.